The habit of ridiculing the devil isn't new. In the Middle Ages, as this panel shows, Beelzebub was not only feared, but also laughed at. So the new film Bedazzled, with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, is carrying on a long tradition. Here's the scene where the devil, disguised as a traffic warden, is teaching his disciple the tricks of the trade and temporarily usurping the role of God.
What a dreary thing to do. I hope you're proud of yourself.
It was pride that got me into this. I used to be an angel, you know, up in heaven.
Oh, yeah, you used to be God's favourite, didn't you?
That's right. I loved Lucifer, it was in those days.
What was it like up in heaven?
Very nice, really. We used to sit round all day and adore him. Believe me, he was adorable. Just about the most adorable thing you ever did see.
Well, with me in the studio is the devil himself, alias Peter Cook, who also wrote the script of that film, and the Reverend Joseph McCulloch, who's rector of St Mary Le Bow in the City of London. Mr. Cook, clowns are often said to be deadly serious people underneath. How serious a message did you really mean there to be behind the laughs in that film?
Oh, there isn't a particularly serious message. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can read into it if you like, but you weren't sort of plonking down a serious message for anybody.
Well, it's fairly moral in the end, isn't it, where he finally rejects the temptations of the devil, having got out of his first selling of his soul.
Yes, well, in the end, all he wants to be, after all the things he goes through with the devil, is to be himself, which is a moral, if you like, which I suppose everybody is trying to be in their own inefficient way.
What sort of religious views, really, do you have, if any?
Well, I have very muddled religious views. I was brought up Church of England. I went to a school where I went to a daily service in the surplice. And so I was sort of fairly inundated with religion early on. And I'm very confused about it all.
Did it occur to you at all that by impersonating the devil, and to some extent actually God, in that film, you might be offending some people?
I suppose we might have offended people. In fact, I think we've offended very few. I've not had many letters saying we're offended. I think it's a fairly genial film which doesn't offend many people. I can't see why it would.
I've got a quotation here from a slightly evangelical paper which says of the scene in which the devil addresses God, the general attitude and language here would be offensive, not only to Christians, but to many uncommitted cinema-goers. Mr. McCulloch, did you find it in any way offensive?
Oh, no, not offensive. On the contrary, I thought it raised the whole problem in a way that made me wonder what was behind it all. I've done a good deal of thinking since, owing to Dudley and Pete. I think I've been made to think about what people are really thinking of the way the church talks.
Well, you see, the church, and particularly the New Testament actually, talks a lot about the devil as a person, and as a perfectly serious person.
Indeed, yes.
Christ himself talks about Satan and the story of his temptation by Satan as a person. Now, how necessary is it for a believing Christian to believe in the devil as a person like this?
Well, I just done a sort of, ever since Messrs. Cook and Moore went to work on this subject, I've been doing a sort of private Gallup poll on my own, and I'll let you have the results if you'd like them. 25%. Are you crazy? They were mostly under the age of 25. 5%, mostly old-age pensioners. Yes, I do believe in the devil. And 70%, I think that's right. Does it add up? Anyhow, 70%, I just don't know.
Mr. Cook, you said that there's meant to be a sort of moral in that film. That does imply that you believe in something that could be called evil. I mean, does the word the devil have any real meaning for you at all?
Not really. I'd like to think the devil existed. I think it'd be much easier for me in my life to feel that there was a devil and have a clear feeling about what was right and what was wrong. I think the trouble with me, and I'd have thought most people, is that often they don't know what is right and what is wrong. There isn't a little conscience in them saying, don't do that, and then you go against your conscience and do it. If one had a clear feeling about what was right and wrong, I think it would be a great deal easier to conduct one's life.
Peter, because I think this can't be upheld, really, you know. In most of the human situation, 99 times out of 100, people know what's right and what's wrong. Whether or not you acknowledge what's inside them, and whether you want to be a human freak and not have this mechanism, I don't know.
Well, I may be a human freak, but I think we're all brought up, say even if we're brought up in a Christian home, which tells you that pride is the greatest sin of all, and that you should eschew it. Nevertheless, we're also told at the same time that it's a very good thing to try and better oneself. It's a very good thing to be ambitious. It's a very good thing. And people say, I have my pride, and this is the reason why I won't do this and I won't do that. And pride is regarded as a virtue on one side and an evil on another. It's regarded as an evil when you're in church and you sing hymns about you being a miserable worm, and we should all be humble. Then you go outside and it's your duty to better yourself and keep up with the Joneses and whatever.
Quite. But you must admit that the area of moral choice in which you really are baffled is comparatively small compared, I'm just saying small now, compared with a number of occasions which you know perfectly well what's the right thing to do and what's the wrong.
Yes, well, I think it's easy in a case, and when it comes down to a simple thing like murder or theft or whatever, you usually have a feeling what is right and wrong. I've never been tempted to murder so far. And if I was, I'd know it was wrong. I've never been tempted to steal because I've been reasonably well off. I wouldn't think it was necessarily wrong to steal if you're extremely badly off.
Well, that's all external, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, most of these things are laid down in the society in which you're living, and you get run in if you do most of them.
But you have a sense you have a very clear sense of the
I
devil, a personal devil who will
well, I was going to
tempt
approach
you
that.
into...
I was going to say that in my famous private Gallup poll, I found that when I asked a subsidiary question, do you know what it is like to be tempted, I got 100% agreement. They all knew this.
But this doesn't prove, surely, that the devil exists any more than the fact that some of us have a sense of what is right and what is wrong proves that God exists. I mean, the existence of a morality, of a humanist morality, which often coincides with
I'm not trying to prove anything just yet.
Well, you ought to be, because you do believe that the devil exists.
I'm just trying to establish the facts of the case, and I'm trying to get Peter to agree with me that these are the facts that we commonly experience. I mean that there is a moral struggle involved in living at all.
But no one would deny this, would they?
Right?
At all,
we agreed on one fact. Now, how do you set to work to explain it? Because you always have to try and rationalize experience or put it into some kind of reasonable state so that you can get by. I mean, things have to have meaning.
Well, can we ask Mr. Cook how he explains it?
Well, I can get by with a feeling of right and wrong with no belief in God. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't like to have a belief in God. I'm not saying I don't have a belief in God. I'm in a state of complete confusion at the moment.
Yeah, but
there's something in me, like when I can believe in God when I go into when I wander around in the country, or I go into a church which is empty, or into a cathedral, and the beauty of the building and the atmosphere conjures up a sort of feeling of mystery and the grandeur of life, and there must be something beyond. But once a service starts, if I go to a church service, I get put right off, and I think, why should I believe in a God whose emissaries are so incompetent, to say the least?
All right, now, Peter, you know perfectly well that I'm not going to argue with you about that, because I probably get the same feeling 9 times out of 10. So, no, but what I'd like to know is, agreed there is this fundamental experience all the time, begging a question, you've got to find, you sound to me like a committee that says we'll leave it on the table. You know, when they can't do something, they say, oh, well, let's leave it next time. Well, you seem to me to be postponing the question. What is the reality behind all this?
I've always felt that God is so obscure that he shouldn't be amazed if he exists, that a lot of people don't believe in him.
Well, can we leave God out of it for the moment?
Yes, but only for the moment, because this is the crucial point, isn't it, that you believe that he stands behind this morality. What really leads you to think that some things are good and some things bad, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's an instinctive feeling entirely. I think there is a small part of it which is instinctive. The rest is how you're brought up and what you're told. I think you could probably bring a child up, if you could isolate it from the world, to have a totally different set of values and would believe all sorts of things are right and all sorts of things are wrong.
Well, this is the simple fact that we're persons in relation. If we were to isolate, isolate the individual, which would be a terrible thing to do, like Robinson Crusoe. He would long to be in relation with persons, obviously, because it's our nature. Agreed that we're persons in relation, then obviously our moral sense must develop as we grow up with the people around us who have certain ideas of what is right and wrong. I'm agreed about that, and I hope you are.
Yes.
Right. Now, what I want to know is, when you come to try and say, well, what the whole thing is about, where do I belong, and so on, what lies behind existence, which seems to me the most important question that existence raises. I'm curious to know what your answer is.
I don't have an answer, and I'd be surprised if
Well,
anybody
then
did
you're
have
like
one.
as I say, you're like the committee that leaves us on the table.
But Mr.
I'm not
McCulloch, you're the one who has the answer, and
Not
it's
a
really
bit.
up to you
I
to
have-
explain why it is the answer.
Like all individuals, I have to find the answer that will serve as the best working hypothesis for me in my life, which is what's called faith, I think, isn't it? Oh, call it faith and not disguise it as anything else. But you have to decide, it seems to me, what life is, where it's going, and what it's here for. I mean, why we are existing. Now, it seems to me we're talking about the devil to start with. One has a lively experience of being betrayed all the time by one's own nature. Agreed? Oh, wait a minute.
Yes, I suppose so.
And this is a common experience. I mean, from the beginning of time, you know, from Adam and Eve onwards, we have felt that we were being betrayed by ourselves, that there is something inside, as it were, interiorly. Well, we've got to try and explain that. Well, naturally, at an early stage in the development of man, he would make very crude images of this. And I think your film, which is absolutely delightful, is an explanation of how man in his early stages explained the way in which he was constantly tripped up in his better intentions. I've talked.
But now we're away from medieval times and whatever. Who is coming up with any better explanation which convinces
I was hoping
anybody?
you were.
It's all very fine when you say, well, these are primitive symbols, and that kind of devil really doesn't exist. The devil is something
well, right.
That
in
is what
modern
you're saying.
terms.
Well, in modern, the interesting thing is that in the 20th century we turned ourselves inwards, as no century has ever done, to investigate the nature of what is called the psyche, I believe, to understand why we tick and what makes us tick and so on. And Freud came up with the id, which would correspond to the devil, I suppose. The unconscious drives, you know, that make us do things that we don't want to do and all that. And Jung went on to rarify upon this work, and he talks about the anima and the shadow, you know, the shadow which is the darkness in our unconsciousness, which makes us do things wrong. But he had to personify. Now, Peter, I want to know, do you ever talk to yourself?
Very seldom. When I'm writing scripts, I mumble to myself.
Oh, but no, seriously, I mean, do you ever talk to yourself? I mean,
I don't have much of a dialogue with myself.
how
really.
interesting, because you're missing a great deal. I think most people do. Most people know that they are tripping themselves up or betraying themselves and so on, and look over their shoulders and say, yes, there you are again, you know.
Well, if I knew when I was betraying myself 100% every time, life for me would be a great deal easier. The trouble is that most choices are not nearly as easy as that, and you don't know when you're betraying yourself. And you don't know whether you think you're betraying yourself because of your upbringing, or whether it's an instinctive feeling in you, or whether you are betraying yourself at all.
I would agree.
Mr. McCulloch, am I right in thinking that you say that these sort of bad feelings that are within us can be put down to the devil if you take the devil as a mere symbol for this complicated state of mind that afflicts us from time to time?
Well, I am merely saying that every one of us has this experience. We've all agreed
Yes.
on it, and
But then
we
you're
then
the
have
one.
to go to, we set to work to rationalize it,
Yes.
to make it reasonable to ourselves. What's happening to us, you know?
You
But if
rationalize.
if one personalizes it as symbolically as a struggle in oneself between one's dark side, the devil, and one's light side, God, how is it that on every count in the 20th century. The devil is winning hands down. Is this just the weakness of the human race? And why are we created so ill-equipped to deal with the situation we're thrust into without being asked?
Well, Peter, you obviously load your questions. I don't agree, of course, that the devil is winning hands down. I think in the 20th century he's had a good run, but it doesn't at all mean that the forces for good, the forces that make for righteousness, are not already becoming apparent in this century.
Can I ask you a question on that? Theologically speaking, would it be possible for the devil to win in the end?
No. That's a simple question, and
I mean,
within any kind
born loser.
He's a born loser, yes, because he's got a specific job to do, as Peter quite clearly shows in his film. His job is to bedevil mankind, to arrest the development of mankind. But you haven't taken up my point. Everybody says they're tempted. And the question is, what does temptation mean, obviously? I mean, what does this mean? If you say you're tempted, most of us aren't tempted to rob the till, but as you quite rightly say, some of us, obviously, are tempted to walk out on commitments, like personal relationships and so on.
But this, I mean, any society which functioned at all would have to have a series of rules of human behavior in order for it to continue to function.
Yes.
Agreed. You always have to have, that you inherit, as you so rightly say, the general rules and principles and experience of the society in which you're living. Your father and mother and so on, communicate them. And your pastors and masters, but if you had any.
Mr. McCulloch, it's you who put God and the devil behind this good and bad.
Well, only as a kind of way of explaining experience.
Well, now this brings us to a crucial question. You use the devil, the person of the devil, as an easy way of explaining the experience of evil.
Well, it has served.
Well, then, aren't you, in using the word God, also merely using a symbolic term? Or do we still have to believe that God is somehow a person?
Oh, God is obviously a symbol, a word used to describe certain deep experience that man knows. Of course, God is analogical.
Is God a person or not?
No, God is not a person. What man says, because he is fumbling towards an understanding of this, is that God is personal. That is to say, that in this understanding of personalities, we've got it. We're learning to be people. What is personal in us must be related to the ultimate reality behind the whole thing.
And we've got to accept that the universe is God's doing, haven't we? He made it all. We didn't, and so we're stuck with it. And therefore, obviously, God has it all ways. I mean, if we don't understand him, that's because he's so ineffable and huge and beyond our scope. It's like we, as the humble ant, cannot hope to understand the human being who happens to trample on him. And we shouldn't really hope to understand. We ask in a very humble and pious way for glimpses of understanding. And it's this sort of abject position which the Church seems to like to get us into, which I find so objectionable, because I don't feel, maybe that I suffer worse than anybody from the sin of pride.
Well,
I should be
the Church tries to sort of browbeat you, I don't think it does. God help the Church in these days if it tries to browbeat. But insofar as it used to, it was wrong. But at the same time, I find in your attitude a most peculiar situation where the third form boy, so to speak, who hasn't done simple interest, wants to be able to comprehend the binomial theorem or something like that.
Yes, well, say we're all searching for faith.
Yeah.
Now, I used to read a lot about the Jansenists, and they said that very few people were granted grace. I mean, it was a thing which very few people on this earth were granted. And the only way you could acquire faith was going through the motions of believing. Like, although you didn't believe a word of it, you should go to church every day, kneel down and pray, and then perhaps you might be granted faith. Now, what kind of a God is it who arbitrarily decides to hand out this delicious teaspoonful of faith to the selected few?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, anybody who says...
Do you believe that faith is only granted to the few? Is it as selective as that?
I'm quite sure that faith is a gift, yes.
is a gift from God.
And I think that most things are gifts from God. I mean, I can't think of anything that isn't. But let us not be too worried about this idea that God is a sort of super individual doling out faith like that. Surely what one tries to see is what kind of a universe it is, and that inside this universe there's a moral struggle going on, and that even the meaning of the moral struggle is ultimately hidden. I mean, I can't see why there should be a moral struggle, but there is.
Yeah.
And that's the way he's made it. Well, I mean, your chap, your devil at the end, shakes his fist at the heavens and says, oh, no
Right,
wonder
mate.
you've got so few friends.
Yes, if this is the way you want it.
Well, I can't argue with the universe. It's there. I mean, you know, the famous old...
There's no reason why one should be
I
grateful for
refute
everything
it,
that
yes.
happens in it to God, though. I don't see why we have to be so abject and humble as to thank God for everything nice that happens to us and think it's our fault if something horrible happens
Well, I
to us.
agree that it's very difficult to see why one should be humble. But I also agree that when you weigh it all up, you realize that there's no other way forward
But aren't you really just
except
making it,
humility.
aren't you perhaps just making it very easy for yourself by saying the whole thing is inexplicable, therefore we'll explain it by putting it down to this strange, huge, ineffable person who is inexplicable?
Well, now, wait a moment. I didn't say that it was inexplicable. I said it was ultimately incomprehensible in the sense that I am not at the stage when I can comprehend God. And anybody who thought he was would be obviously
Do you believe
Coney
in,
Hatch.
do you believe in a heaven and hell?
Well, yes, insofar as they are symbols, again, words to connote certain experience.
No, but certain experience which we know nothing of, because none of
Oh,
us
no,
have been
wait
to
a
heaven
moment.
or
I
to
don't
hell.
agree there, because I think that the Christian means, you see, these are Christian words used in a particular way, just as a poet uses words to express a certain emotion. Christian uses these words advisedly. He means by heaven the knowing God and the sense of being with God and doing the will of God. This is heaven.
Do you think
And
that...
as the Christian defines God in action as love, I think he's fairly clear.
But Mr. McCulloch,
And hell is obviously being excluded from that
But do you believe that
by your
anybody...
own, and being aware that you excluded yourself.
Do you believe that any soul will be condemned by God to whatever the pictorial
No, I
allegory
don't
which is
believe
chosen?
that.
I refuse to believe in a God who's going to damn me.
No, I don't believe that.
I think I'll get another chance.
I think that kind of thing crept in, and we needn't worry too much about it now.
But the trouble is, it's crept in all along the history of
Yes,
the
well,
church.
again,
When it says
fanatics in-
crept in, it's not crept in. It's been a dominating part of the church's power. The
No,
church's
no.
power
The great-
over
the
people
great-
in the past was enormous, and also caused a great deal of suffering,
Dear,
torture, and
dear
everything else.
Peter, the dominating.
Then we say, oh, that's the bad part of it all. Sure, the last 900 centuries were a bit of a mistake, but now in the 20th century, at last the church is getting towards something which we can...
The dominating thing about the church's history is compassion. The church throughout the 19th centuries has been distinguished by teaching mankind compassion, and I don't think you disbelieve that either. I mean, the Middle Ages were redeemed for all the awfulness of the church in many ways by the sense that it kept compassion alive in man.
church is never very compassionate in wartime, is it? It's always rather keen on its own
I don't
side.
agree with you. I think that the church, the real church, is very compassionate. In wartime, you merely talking about chaplains breaking bottles on...
But this
guns
is what
and-
ordinary people see, and if I may bring you back a bit to what
I don't
ordinary
think ordinary people
believe.
see all that's in front of them, do you?
Well, they are, for instance, you've been talking about God and the devil as being symbolic, poetic terms, and I think perhaps Peter Cook and I would go with you in saying that if you must use such terms for expressing such things, all right. But most ordinary Christian believers believe much more literally than that. They've been taught literally in literal language. If this literal language about God as a person and the devil as a person isn't true, and we've grown up from the
No, it
Middle
isn't
Ages...
true, you see. You use words inadvisedly.
Well, I mean, if they are not to be taken literally, that's
Well,
all.
I mean, no words should be... I don't think... I'm agreeing with the philosophers of our century who are most dubious about the use of words. I think words have been used too carelessly. We use the word the devil without really thinking what we mean.
And God
Now, I
has
think the
too.
great debt we owe to Peter Cook and Dudley Moore is that they've made us, and a lot of people who go to that film will come out wondering just exactly what they mean by the devil. I think it's important we discover this, because it's undoubtedly a fact of existence, that there is a power, not ourselves, in ourselves, that is constantly pulling us back and frustrating our best intentions.
Do you think the church or individuals in the church should take strong positions on world events and things like wars which break out? Do you think the church should remain silent, or should they come out with a definite point of view?
But
Very few individual clergymen do. I mean, they say come out with controversial. I mean, the Pope will come out with his usual controversial plea for peace and so on. But only very recently has he started sort of taking a direct political interest in it and trying to do something about it. And do you think that's a good thing? I'm sure it is.
yes, I think the church, you see, is generally, as William Temple said, when the people say the church should do something about it, they mean a bishop should talk, which God forbid, obviously. But if they mean that the church should lay it upon its conscience and do something in the sense of serving and suffering in this situation, in the war situation, which, by the way, the church did, the real church, went out and helped the wounded and tried to pick up the pieces and joined in the general suffering.
May I bring you back to this point of language in belief? You've dealt with the devil and, to a certain extent, God, but I would just like to put again the point of view of perhaps the ordinary religious churchgoer who has always been taught that these words had value as themselves, and not that they were symbolic and poetic. And aren't you, in a way, being slightly dishonest in allowing them to accept literal language when really you mean poetic and symbolic?
No, you see, if you use words as symbols and know what you're doing, I mean, Jung doesn't mean that there's a chap called a shadow that you should talk to when you've got into a tizzy.
No, but you
He
mean that
simply
there's
means
chap
it's a
called God
useful
you're talking to.
device. Now the whole subject of God is the use of the word God, you mean?
Yes.
It is obviously meant to describe so great a reality that it's only a useful shorthand way of telling other people what you're really talking about, or trying to.
Can we get back to you didn't believe that a God could exist who would damn anybody for eternity?
I can't see that in the universe.
No, I think that's a very good thing. I believe that, and if there is a God, which I believe in or will believe in, he's a forgiving and understanding God, and I should be able to get away with what I do in this world. And perhaps in another time I should be able to behave myself a little better.
Well, that's the lot for us, I'm afraid. Thank you very much, Mr. Cook. Thank you, Mr. McCulloch. And that's all from Meeting Point and Talk of the Devil.